Hey guys, how's it going? So as you can tell, I'm not here today, so I instead decided to make you this PowerPoint. You guys should be following along in your notebooks, take notes. The main point of this is we're talking about multiplying and dividing integers today. Adding and subtracting was a lot more difficult than this is. For multiplying and dividing, you just use the rules that you already know. You just have to make sure that you do the right things with your negatives. All right. So the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and pause your screen. And once you pause it on this page, I want you to write down these rules, okay? So this is basically just telling you how you figure out if something is a positive or a negative. So I want you to write down what I have highlighted in yellow and in red, but then also make sure you write down the shortcut because that might be easier to think of for some of you. So the first thing it says here is that a positive times a positive is a positive. We know that. We've been doing that forever. And then it also says at the bottom that a negative times a negative is a positive, which we also should know. And then a positive times a negative is a negative, and a negative times a positive is also a negative. Okay. And then talking about dividing, a positive divided by a positive is a positive, which is what you've been doing. Remember, you can get like a decimal, which would be less than one, but it's still a positive number. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, and then two negatives make a positive. So the shortcut here is the easiest way that I at least think of it. So what I do is I ask myself, do I have an even number of negatives or an odd number? Because if I have an odd number of negatives, so for example, let's say I have, if I have like -1 times -3 times -5, I would have three negatives, so that's an odd number. So I would know that my answer has to be negative, okay? But on the other hand, if I have an even number of negatives, so like -6 times -12, I know that my answer is going to eventually be positive, okay? So that's how I think of it. I just think about, do I have an even number of negatives or an odd number? Odd means my answer is going to be negative. If I have an even number, that means it's going to be positive. I like doing it like that because then I don't necessarily need to remember the rule. Okay. All right. So let's start moving on to let's see here. Yeah, let's start moving on to some examples. So the first example I have is -3 times 5. So for this particular problem, I know that I have an odd number of negatives since I only have this one negative here. So I know that my answer is going to be negative something, and then I just do my multiplication. 3 times 5 is 15. So my answer is going to be negative 15. All right, not too bad on that one. For the next one, I have two negatives, one here, one there. So I know my answer is going to be positive. So 5 times 2 is 10, so my answer is going to be positive 10 for that. All right, next one I have is 5 times -6. Ooh, I need to stop moving that thing. Let's see. All right, so for this problem, I have 5 times -6. I have one negative, which is odd. So I'm going to have -5 times 6, which is 30. So my answer is going to be -30. All right, moving on. Now I can give you multiplication problems that are either decimals or fractions. So in this problem, we have 1.2 times -3.7. So before I solve for an answer, I know my answer is going to be negative because I have one negative here, which is an odd number of negatives. Or you can just know that a positive times a negative is a negative. But now I actually have to do some work with this. So I have 1.2 times 3.7. Some of you, since I'm not going to give you a calculator, you need a bit of a review over how to multiply with decimals. So I'm going to multiply like I normally do. 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8. Add 0, 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Then I add these up. So 4, 14, carry the 1. So I have 4, 4, and 4. But now I got to count the amount of spaces I have behind my decimal. I have 2. So I'm going to move my decimal over, and my answer is going to be 4.44. But I know it's negative, so my answer is negative 4.44. All right, next one. Now we have some fractions. Those never go away. So I have a negative times a positive, so my answer is going to be negative. So I have 3/4 times 2/5. fifths. Couple of ways to do this. When you multiply, you just multiply straight across. But I can cross reduce. I know 2 and 4. I can take a 2 out of both, so that's going to be a 1. That's going to be a 2 now. So 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 5 is 10. So my answer is -3 tenths. Did you have to cross reduce? No. You just would have had to do more reducing at the end. All right, so now moving on to division. Like I said, the rules are the same. So a positive divided by a negative is still a negative. 52 and 14, I believe that's 13. So my answer is going to be -13 here. Next, I have 3 divided by -6. So right off the bat, I know that my answer is going to be negative something. 3 divided by -6, that reduces down to 1/2. So my answer would be -1/2. Like I said, as you go through these, you can pause it, slow it down, and make sure that you have it written down. I'm just going kind of fast since they are already here for me. All right, so the next one, I have a decimal divided by a whole number, but they're both positive, so my answer is going to be positive. So I need to do 2.5 divided by 8. 8 doesn't go into 2, but it would go into 25, and it would go into 25 3 times. I need to move my decimal up. It's 24, subtract 1. Bring down your zeros now. 8 goes into 10 once. Let me move that box up a little bit. All right, so once is 10, so that's 8. Subtract, that's 2. Bring down another 0 here. 8 goes into 20 twice. So my answer is going to be around 0.312. There we go. And then last but not least, we have 2 negatives. So a negative divided by a negative we know is a positive. Also, I have an even number of negatives, so my answer is going to be positive. 1/4 divided by 2/3. For those of you who forgot, when you are dividing, you do your keep, change, flip, not to be confused with KFC. So keep, you keep your first fraction, you flip division to multiplication. You change division multiplication, then you flip your second fraction, so it's going to be 3/2. Now I can multiply across, and I'm going to get 3/8. So my answer is positive 3/8. Or you could just pretend like positive isn't there and just write 3/8. Same thing. All right, so these are your notes over multiplying and dividing. You guys do have homework tonight. It is on Google Classroom, so please make sure you take a look at that. It is due for homework tomorrow. Also, if you get finished with that, I have a new green sheet for you that should be on my desk. And then if you get done with everything, you can either work on something academically or something for another class. Or you can read. That's always an option. All right, guys, thanks, and I will see you tomorrow.